Well, all right, you guys. Good morning. It is Wednesday morning. Well, you know what day it is. I am going to do this video. There's so much material here. It's probably not going to be a short video because I don't know. I don't have the mind or the equipment to edit, so I just have to wing it. But I'm going to address this video to Ann Wagner in her capacity as chairman of the subcommittee on capital markets, and hopefully one of her legislative aides may be driving across the state of Missouri, the prove it to me state, will listen. It's not going to be all theory. I'm going to go through a case and comment as I go. But Honorable Ann Wagner, Congresswoman, what has happened in the capital markets is a tragedy. And the people you listen to who pay you money because they get your ear, that this is the lobbyists, Goldman Sachs, you listen to Gary Gensler, all of these people are on the side of this destruction of the market. And, you know, I don't want to get into a battle that you're friends with them. They assure you that they're honorable and what they're doing is correct. But I think Congresswoman Wagner, that you need to ignore the pleas to hide the consolidated audit trail. This goes on because they can hide it. If you asked a border patrol person at Dulles Airport how many tons of cocaine Pablo Escobar flew into the country, he wouldn't know because they hide that. So unless you define the problem, and sorry, Congresswoman, I didn't mean to be impolite. You need, from your state, you need to prove it first. Prove it to me. Prove it. Now, so I'm going to stop on that because it's going to be a long call. But please allow the light of day on the sales of counterfeit and non-existent shares. The second thing I want to point out to you about the markets, there have been so many changes in the markets over the last years, but it all helps the banks, the brokers, the hedge funds, the big pools of money, steal money from the taxpayer and investors, retirement plans, women, minorities, companies, state and local tax policies. So what you have is a huge structure fighting against what is right. So, sorry, Congresswoman, I apologize. What is happening in the broadest sense is that the brainiacs on Wall Street have decided to turn the United States securities markets into the fractional reserve banking system. Obviously, in the banking system, money is fungible. In the capital markets, securities aren't fungible. You've got corporate governance, you've got dividends, but you have a similar characteristic. Not everybody's going to ask for their shares at the same time. And this opens up tremendous fraud in the markets. Cheating, stealing, thieving. one of the first things Wall Street did was to get rid of type 1, another word, safekeeping. So investors now have the only choice is to go in electronically, just like in the banking system. So we have to trust our statements. Well, the statements are fraudulent. They don't reflect real shares. It's just mimeographed. In the case of MMTLP, which you're hearing about, the numbers are anywhere, who knows? This is a crime that's gone on from Torchlight to MMAT to MMTLP. They could be 10 times over the real shares. But the key thing is, it's not the only company. It happens in all companies in the U.S. markets. Now, the other thing they changed is the so-called Merrill Lynch rule. Brokerage firms, which are now wealth advisors, gather assets and put it in managed money, whichever narrows the managers to some wealthy white men. They earn fees, bonuses, and they pay out a trail to the brokerage houses. There's very limited legal risk. The lawyers go along with this. But in those pools of money, they lend out shares. And they lend them out like a Xerox machine. Copy after copy after copy after copy. They have fancy words for it, but they're just selling the same title over and over and over and over and over again. In the big stocks, Congresswoman Wagner, there is enormous countervailing weight provided by institutional buying and research and the desire to own the shares. Now, there may be nods and winks because I'll tell you in a second. But this counterbalancing buying does not exist in the small markets. There are no research reports from major firms. There are no squawk box calls that go out to system-wide to generate buying interest. There are no institutions buying. There are no market makers. They lied to you about that. There are no market makers. There's no brokerage firms maintaining an orderly market. There's no roadshows. It is impossible for small companies to have access to the capital markets. If a small company needs capital, they will be destroyed in the market, and it's thousands. And that goes all the way up to the NASDAQ. It's any company under $1 billion or so in market cap, and they'll take it down. They'll take it down below those levels. They know the levels. Okay, the other thing is how it helps Wall Street is it increases assets under management. So it increases annual fees, bonuses, but it's all counterfeit. Congressman Wagner, our markets are based on the model of fractional reserve banking. So when you see the enormous wealth in our stock markets, 5 to 10 X of it, so you got to do it in reverse, 50%, maybe to 95% of it. Maybe it's more than that. I'm bad at arithmetic in my head. If you only have 10% real assets and the rest are all just entries, you've increased your assets under management by 10x. But it's also a very weak market and it's subject to panic and collapse. But that's okay with you. The only way you can find this out, because you're not going to believe me, is do the audited trail and stop listening to Gary Gensler. Stop listening to Adina Friedman and Robert Cook and the guy at over-the-counter market. Stop listening to them. Stop listening to the lobbyists at Goldman Sachs and Citadel and BlackRock, if you have the courage. So what happens, I want to move on to this case, but what happens in, Congresswoman, I apologize, I know I'm not your equal, and I really don't mean to be rude, it's unintentional. What happens is these big pools of funds, like Susquehanna, Citadel, Stevie Cohen's, even the bigger ones. Now, they don't do it out in the open, and maybe one of them's honest, but at arm's length, they hire these fronts who have big, huge hedge funds behind them. But what happens is you get these fronts, these, you know, what do you call them? You know, the hunting dogs, to go out and bang the bushes to find CEOs who need capital. As soon as the company says, okay, I'll talk, they start selling shares that don't exist, Congresswoman. And this is why we need the consolidated audit trail. They sell into existence, just like the banks loan money into existence. These disreputable, greedy actors who you have no interest in tracking, which I think you should, they sell into existence non-existent shares. Gary Gensler does not enforce settlement. He doesn't care, and neither do the other people I mentioned. Broker-dealers do not enforce settlement. They do not enforce receipt of real shares because they don't want to insult their cash cows, the prime brokers. So the prime broker and the broker-dealers fail to receive shares. The sellers, which are hedge funds, often offshore, do not deliver. They fail to deliver. But prior to delivery, they fail to locate. And if you look at even at Reg Show, which is just a sieve for cheating, all Reg Show did is expand the damage in the dam and open it up so the whole Nile can flow over all at once, or the Amazon, or the Yangtze, all of it, all at once, the cheating. So there's failure to locate, which needs to be in writing. They never do. There's manipulation using computers and algorithms. Older men believe that there's systems in place. There are no systems in place for this. And so what you do by allowing the fraud to continue, by not insisting on transparency, not exposing the trading to the light of day, is you allow this theft to continue. And finally, Congresswoman, before I start on this, and then you can tune out, or maybe your aide could listen to the rest of it. This is a tax issue. It's a tax issue. We're about to go to, I guess we're at war with Russia. We may go to war in the Middle East, and we may go to war in China. We've got the baby boom generation retiring. We've got to absorb upwards of 20 million new citizens. Well, they're not citizens now, but it looks like it'll be fast-tracked into a country whose economy, well, I think seems pretty strong in many measures, but it's going to be under stress over the next decade. We have projected deficits and debt rising forever. Well, these guys, they're all men. I don't know a single woman involved. And there's other characteristics too that narrow them. I think it may be cartel money. It may be other nefarious money laundering, in other words. But it is trillions of dollars of shares which are sold into existence, sucking money out of the system like a sponge sucks spilled milk. And the characters can't get access to that money until the trade closes. Well, if they can bankrupt the company, if they can get the company seller boxed, you can look that up, seller boxed, or if they can just dilute the heck out of the denominator. So on a per share basis, anything a CEO does doesn't matter. Well, they never have to cover. They then scare the CEOs into reverse splits. And by definition, if you go from 100 million shares short, undelivered, and you do a 50-for-1 reverse split, what is that? 98 million shares you no longer have a maintenance requirement on. That money can be released. There's no, Congresswoman, there's no closing transaction. This is the theft of trillions of dollars in tax money. Not only does it destroy companies at the local level, jobs and revenue for the federal government, but it's revenue for the locals, it's revenue for the states, it's revenue for cities too, if depending on where the company is. And your choice by inaction is to just let this continue. But Congressman, woman, you need to look at the true enormity of this problem and how scary it is for the United States stock markets and the United States. And you have to use it, your prove it mentality. And only you can stand athwart this financial train robbery and yell stop. Only you. How? Transparency. And until you demand transparency, which the CAT would provide, you're going to be subject to the doubts in your mind by the people that donate massive amounts of money to you. I'm not accusing you of corruption. I just say they have your ear. I don't have your ear. All right, I'm going to move on. That's 20 minutes. You know what, Congresswoman, I'm going to stop it here and do a second video. That way, maybe you'll listen to this one. Cheers. Thank you very much if you are listening.